Here I have a shuttle mini computer, small form factor computer that I got from a client who called me and said my computer won't boot and it just gives me a black screen and nothing happens. So I went out to his place and sure enough it was just as he described. And something like this isn't what I normally would like to disassemble and do in front of a client. They get a little bit freaked out when their computer ends up looking like this. So I brought it back to the shop with me and put it on the workbench, and we'll see if we can figure out what's wrong. This is a little bit of troubleshooting. So the first thing we do is plug the power in, and we can see, if you look here, you can see that green light, so we know the motherboard is at least getting enough power to light that light. And we will turn on the power switch. And a few good things. One is you can see right here, these lights came on. These lights came on. So we know the motherboard's saying that power. And you really can't see, but you can hear the computer fan whirring, the CPU cooling fan. So we know the motherboard is getting power from the power supply, so the power supply isn't dead. Now I do have a standalone power supply tester, but I usually try these sort of things first so I don't have to unplug everything and plug it in. So we've got a couple of things going on here. One, most people, if you've used a computer for a while, know that once things start whirring and humming, after a little bit you hear a beep, and that lets you know that the computer's starting its posting process. Post stands for power on self-test, and basically the BIOS, which is a little chip that interfaces between the motherboard and all the components, goes through and checks video and memory and all that sort of thing to make sure your computer is configured to at least try to boot. And we're not getting any beep, so we know that something is wrong there. And also, we're getting nothing on the video. So he told me it was just a black screen, and sure enough, here's the monitor, and you can see at the bottom center an orange light. That should turn green, and we should start seeing text on the video screen or image, and we don't. So we've got power, we've got fans, but that's as far as it goes. So we have to do some more troubleshooting here. It's a little more in depth. So let's turn it off. I'll press the power button. Doesn't turn off. So I press and hold. Usually on a PC, if you press and hold the power button for a few seconds, it shuts off. But I can tell you from prior experience here, I can sit here for 5 minutes and the computer will not turn off. So the only way to turn this computer off is to actually unplug the power cable. Now this power supply on this little computer does not have a switch, so I can't just flip the switch, which normally would be a preferable way to do it. So we've got something suspicious here. The computer will not shut off, so for some reason it's reading the switch to power on, but it's not reading the power off signal. So we need to do a little bit more in-depth troubleshooting, and one thing I found over the years that can be very helpful in things like this is called a debug card. A debug card is a handy little card that just plugs into one of the expansion slots in your computer. This one is set up for the more modern PCI, and then you can flip it this way and use the old-fashioned ISA, so you have one card for two different types of systems, which can be handy. This display here shows you codes, and each code tells you what part of the system is being tested to see if it's okay. Generally, if it gets to a code and just hangs there, that means that section of the process is bad. Something's wrong. You have to figure out why. Another thing, you're not going to be able to read it, but you can see here we've got a set of 6 little LEDs, and they give us information. The left-hand row up and the top on the right are voltages, so that's basically a power supply tester. It lets us know that the power supply is saying the proper voltages, 12, 5, 3.3. The center one here lights up to let us know that the BIOS is activated and that it's being recognized by the system. This is reset. It's generally off, and when you hit the reset button, it lights, and then the reset button, it shuts off. This basically lets you know that the motherboard is receiving the reset signal. This is a little speaker in case the computer doesn't have one hooked up, so you can hear any beep codes. This is a expansion header that you plug in an extra display, because sometimes when you plug these things in, the display gets turned around backward, or some cases are really tight and you just can't read the display, so that lets you put it outside the case where you can see it more easily. And this little switch here, when you're all done, each time you click it, it starts at the beginning, and each time you click it, it goes through each code, so you can see how far along the process it got. And there's a manual that lets you look up the codes to tell you what went bad. So what we will do is plug this into the computer. Plug the power on, in. I can talk. And the first thing we see here is this light comes on to let us know that the standby power is working, which is good. This is what, if that comes on, we can see here the mouse is lit. And that will give you a system that you can plug in your iPod or some other USB device, your cell phone, and you can charge it even if your computer's turned off, which can be handy. So let's turn the power on and see what we get. It should start giving us codes. Okay, so the lights came on. We see some good things. One is, if you look, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are the voltages, so they're all lit, which means that the power supply is working and it's sending out the proper voltages, so that's good. But we also have a few problems. One is the display is all dashes, which means that the system is not initializing, which would mean that it would set that to all zeros to start the post process. And we can see why, because the center light is dark, which means the BIOS hasn't activated. It's not working. So the third thing that's bad is this bottom right hand light is lit, which that is the reset light. And remember earlier I said that should be dark. It should only come on when you hit the reset button and then go off as soon as you let go of the reset button. So it's on all the time, which is not good. So I think that is telling us what our problem is. Either the motherboard or the switch has shorted out, and it's constantly sending reset signals to the motherboard, so it can never get to the posting process because it's constantly being told to start over from the very beginning. And of course it's doing it so fast that to us it just looks like it's sitting there doing nothing in a black screen. So on a full-size system, a normal system, I would have a pretty easy job of figuring out if the switch is bad or if the motherboard is bad by just going to the pins that have all the connectors to it, find the one for the reset switch and pull the reset switch off, and then try again and see if it works. However, the shuttles are nifty little computers, but they're not standard. They're proprietary stuff in them. So that means I'm going to have to do some disassembling and see if I can actually disconnect the reset switch or not. Sometimes on these little computers, all the switches are in a block, and it's all or nothing. So, I mean, I can always, cut the wire, and that would work, but obviously you don't want to do that. So that is a little video to kind of show you how a debug card can help you determine what is wrong with a system that won't boot. I've been working on computers for over 20 years, and I can tell you that a bad reset switch is not something that you would immediately come to mind, at least not to me. Maybe there's guys out there smarter than me that would. But something like this would probably take a lot longer to figure it out without the card. And a lot of times you may have never figured it out, just, throw away the computer and do a new one because it won't boot. Which may have to be done with this one if it's not easy enough to fix or if it is the motherboard. But at least we have a fighting chance of figuring out what's wrong. Hope this helped. Hope it was handy, and good luck. So, to continue on our troubleshooting here, turned out there's the reset switch. It was hot glued in there, and it goes into this harness, which in turn goes down. It's kind of hard to see. Right there. If you look here, it's a block all put together. So I end up having to cut the wire, but I figured A, you don't use a reset switch very much anymore, and B, I can always solder it back together if I have to. So let me turn off my little there. So let's try plugging this puppy back in and see if it's the motherboard or if it's a bad switch. Power on. And we see we have got the exact same thing we had before. So the reset signal is on constantly. So it's most likely something on that interface board or on the motherboard. So at this point, I have to discuss things with the client and determine what to do, because it can get really expensive in a hurry, and this computer is probably a couple years old. I built this for him a couple years ago. And the problem with computers a couple years old is that if you have to replace the motherboard or the interface board, that's going to be fairly pricey, and it's probably going to be a week or so to get the part. Then it's going to be my labor to completely disassemble the whole thing down to bare metal and then completely rebuild it just like I did the first time. And again, it's labor, and when you're paying somebody to do it, that can add up quick. If you're doing it for yourself, depends on how much you value your time, or if you have the time to do it, then it's free. So at this point, we know that the reset switch is not the problem, and it's probably going to be something expensive. So this system will probably not be repaired, but I can pull the CPU because it's fairly new, the memory, the hard drive, the DVD drive, and all that kind of stuff, and use that to build a new system without having to completely buy everything brand new. So it won't be as bad as it could be. If it was 4 or 5 years old, then that'd be a whole different story. So I hope this video has helped you get a little insight into troubleshooting and some of the tools you can use, and that should do it.